When I lost my memory, I fell into an almost enchanted love with Liu Ruyan. I even nearly drowned myself trying to save her, despite never having learned to swim. But in the very moment I was on the brink of death, she was on the phone with her beloved, her white moonlight. "I only love you," she said. "He's nothing but a backup." After I miraculously survived, I finally remembered one thing before I lost my memory. The one I loved was Liu Ruyan's younger sister. Eventually, I got married to YB Dan, but Liu Ruyan, with reddened eyes, came to me. "I beg you, can you ... forget me just one more time?" I thought I would never wake again. The river was already cold with autumn's chill. From the shore, I shouted for Liu Ruyan to come back to the bank, but she wouldn't turn around, as if clinging to a desire for death. She continued steadfastly toward the center of the river. Panic seized me. I threw off my jacket and shoes and plunged into the water, forgetting that I could barely swim. With sheer determination, I reached her side. I grabbed her, struggling to drag her back to shore. Summoning every ounce of strength, I hoisted her up onto the bank. But when it came time for me to climb out, I found that I had no strength left. Not a single bit. And Liu Ruyan, she didn't even look at me. She only picked up her phone from the bank, murmuring that name that pierced my heart, Luhan. "You really don't care about me at all. Even jumping into the river, you didn't come for me." She didn't notice that I was already sinking beneath the water's surface, and I was so exhausted, I couldn't even cry out for help. A sharp pain stabbed through my heart, as if someone had plunged a knife into it. But it wasn't enough just to stab. They twisted the blade back and forth, making sure the wound bled profusely. In these 3 years, I had given everything I could to Liu Ruyan, everything but my very life. Yet the moment Luhan returned to the country, Liu Ruyan didn't hesitate to forget me. So completely that it was as if she were the one with amnesia, and not me. At the moment I sank below the water, I saw her tapping her phone with her finger. I thought she was calling for help to save me, but she answered a call instead, tears streaming down her face, whispering, "Luhan, I only love you. Nobody else can compare to you. Hikong was just someone to pass the time while you were gone. I've been waiting for you to come back." As I sank to the river's depths, I couldn't help but want to laugh bitterly. Fool! If he truly cared about you, would he have left the country for 3 years? Without even a single word? He's just looking for excuses to keep you under his control. And the one who truly loves you, you're going to let him drown. I am the only son of the He family, the sole heir. After I suddenly lost my memory, I fell for Liu Ruyan with an unwavering passion. When my childhood friend got drunk, he called me and asked, "Have you been bewitched? If you've been cursed, tell me. I'll find someone to cure you." And my response was to hang up, because that night Liu Ruyan was drunk, and I needed to pick her up. I hurried to her, only to find her with tear-stained, reddened eyes. Beside her stood a man, who gave me a cold nod, and then left in a taxi. Liu Ruyan called out his name from behind the car, "Luhan." I froze for a moment. I knew of Luhan. He was Liu Ruyan's white moonlight, her unattainable love, who left for another country without a word. Now he was back, and he had the audacity to blame Liu Ruyan, to hold it against her for not waiting for him, for being with me. Liu Ruyan squatted on the roadside, crying, her hands covering her face, tears slipping through her fingers. I had never seen her cry like this before. When we argued, Liu Ruyan would just give a cold smile, and could go a whole day without speaking to me, until I couldn't take it anymore and would go to make peace with her. I never knew that Liu Ruyan could cry like this. That day, I brought her home and handed her a warm towel so she could wipe her face. "Liu Ruyan, if you truly love Luhan, I'll step back." But Liu Ruyan, sobbing, continued until she cried herself to sleep. Without saying a word, I thought, That she'd remembered I was her actual boyfriend now. That just maybe, she couldn't bear to leave me. Later, I found out she hadn't even heard me, she'd been crying too hard. In the end, I didn't drown. Liu Ruyan eventually remembered I existed and called out for help. Her cries drew a few elderly fishermen who pulled me out of the water. When they got me to shore, I had already fallen unconscious. They rushed me to the hospital. In truth, by the time I was sent away, I was still somewhat conscious, though as helpless as a living ghost. I could hear, but couldn't move. I heard Liu Ruyan frantic, running beside me, calling my name. He Kong, you'll be okay, won't you? She was crying harder than I'd ever seen. Why did you go in the water when you can't even swim? Why? I also heard her pleading with the doctors. Please bring him back to consciousness. He can't die. Seeing Liu Ruyan like this left me confused. At that time, my life was slipping away quickly. My mind clouded and weak. But even then, I was deeply puzzled. Wasn't she just confessing her love to Luhan? Hadn't she already made up her mind to leave me? She was so resolute. And now suddenly, she was someone else entirely. Soon after, I heard another familiar voice, stern and unforgiving, questioning Liu Ruyan. Didn't you say you would cherish He Kong? Is this how you cherish him? It was my childhood friend. Since I planned to propose to Liu Ruyan and asked her for help in choosing a ring, she had abruptly cut me off. She hadn't shown up in a long time. And now, with a choked voice, she was running alongside my hospital bed. He Kong, wake up for me. You told me half a sentence 3 years ago. I've been waiting to hear the rest. Wake up, please. I felt utterly drained, the world around me fading into darkness. I thought I might be falling into an endless night. Yet before the darkness could fully take over, I still found myself wondering, what half a sentence? I couldn't remember a thing about it. Losing memories truly is troublesome. My feelings for Liu Ruyan were actually quite simple. One day, I saw Liu Ruyan sitting in the Liu family's courtyard, wearing a beige dress, painting peacefully. The sunlight bathed her, a gentle breeze stirring around her. The world seemed perfectly at peace. That scene struck me deeply. Something in my heart told me I loved this girl. This girl in a beige dress, painting under the sunlight. And that I had loved her for a long time. Even with my amnesia, I felt certain it was Liu Ruyan. From that day on, I started to pursue her. The latest couture dresses, luxurious jewelry, I sent them to the Liu family as if money meant nothing. When Liu Ruyan craved fried pastries, I drove to the neighboring city, waited in line for 2 hours, and bought her the most authentic ones. When her health was weak, I watched countless videos online to learn how to make nourishing soups and congee, personally preparing her meals to nurse her back to health. When she couldn't sleep, I took her to see the best traditional doctors we could find. By the end of it, I had learned so much. I could understand medical theories myself. I told myself I had done everything I possibly could. But Liu Ruyan never truly opened up to me. I could tell. Her smiles were always forced when they were directed at me. Then Luhan returned. The very first night of his return, the insomnia that had plagued Liu Ruyan for 3 long years vanished without a single dose of medicine. She even dreamed. I don't know what she dreamed of, but a soft smile gradually curved on her lips, a smile filled with happiness. Watching her content expression as she slept, I suddenly felt a strong urge to smoke. But I knew Liu Ruyan hated the smell of cigarettes. I had once quit smoking for her. But that night, the urge to smoke returned so strongly. I went downstairs to the convenience store, bought a pack, and smoked 2 cigarettes before going back upstairs. After Luhan returned, my childhood friend had subtly tried to encourage me. She'd say, why don't you spend more time with your sister, go shopping, or watch a movie or something, meet up more often. She didn't say it outright, but I knew she was worried about Liu Ruyan and Luhan, that their old feelings might rekindle. I felt grateful to her. Ever since I confessed my love to Liu Ruyan, This friend of mine had started drinking, smoking, and riding a motorcycle. People said Bai Youwei used to be such a good girl, and nobody understood why she had changed. Sometimes I wondered too, even seeing her drink and smoke. I still thought she was a good girl. She always seemed like one. Now, she was worried that Liu Ruyan might leave me. But she still took care to protect my pride. A small warmth bloomed in my heart. I smiled at her. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. But I was only saying that to comfort Bai Youwei. Inside, I felt no confidence at all. Liu Ruyan came home later and later. First missing dinner, then bringing takeout when she returned at night. Until finally she'd come back in the early morning, chilled to the bone. She'd carry her laptop with her, claiming that the Liu family had a lot of work recently, and she needed to work overtime. But the joy that lit up her eyes, she couldn't hide it, no matter how she tried. I had worked overtime before. Working late was never something to smile about, but I just pressed my lips together and said nothing. Liu Ruyan grew colder and more distant. Now, she hardly spoke 10 words a day at home. Even when I asked her, she wouldn't respond. Sometimes I found myself deeply confused. We had good times together. So many nights when Liu Ruyan would curl up in my arms, asking me to warm her ice-cold hands and feet. We'd watch romantic movies together, and she would cry, her voice thick with emotion, saying, "Let's stay like this forever." We even went to hang a love lock together. As we locked it, she clung to my arm, her face filled with reverence. How did she manage it? How did she change into someone else overnight? I couldn't understand. I'm a stubborn person. Once I've chosen someone, I find it hard to let go. Later, Liu Ruyan stopped coming home, wouldn't answer her phone, but I kept maintaining this home that was now just mine alone. Sometimes Bai Youwei would grow impatient with it, and she'd argue with Liu Ruyan. But it was useless. Instead, Liu Ruyan would call me and say, "He calm. Don't do things that make me look down on you. Don't use my little sister." At first, I tried to defend myself, but one day, Liu Ruyan, infuriated, shouted, "Do you think that by doing all these pathetic things, I'll forget about Luhan? Dream on!" It was early autumn that day. A gust of wind swept by, chilling me to the core. I froze in place. And after a long while, Liu Ruyan cleared her throat, coughed lightly, and said, "That's not what I meant." I looked down, forcing a smile. "Liu Ruyan, I don't need you. If you don't love me, let's just end it. Just say the word, and I'll agree." Liu Ruyan said nothing. I waited for a while, sighed, and said, "Then let me be the one to say it. Liu Ruyan, let's not be together anymore." The words were heavy, but I forced them out. I had to accept that. You can't force a fruit to taste sweet if it's bitter. But that day, Liu Ruyan said nothing. I thought that breaking up would make her happy, but instead, she hung up silently. Later that night, she called me again. Drunk. Her voice slurred. Let me think about it." "Okay." I sighed. "Think about what?" "I just need to think." Liu Ruyan insisted. I thought I knew which side was more important, but now I can't seem to see clearly. I shook my head. "Liu Ruyan, I don't want to keep waiting." All those late nights spent waiting. The loneliness of watching dawn come alone again and again. I've had enough. "Liu Ruyan, let's break up." I said it calmly, drawing a line to end our strained relationship. But Liu Ruyan still didn't respond, only ended the call in silence. The next day, she sent me a message, showing me a picture of her bedroom. I've been staying at home these past few days. Even Bai Youwei vouched for her. My sister's been home every night. Every night after 10, I went looking for her and brought her back home. I couldn't help but laugh at Bai Yuwei's pout. "It's not necessary." "Bai Youwei, but thank you." I was certain about breaking up. But Liu Ruyan seemed to think differently. She started texting me frequently, calling me, acting as if nothing had happened. She even started calling me husband, a title she'd always avoided before. In the past, just hearing her say husband would have made her turn against me instantly. I didn't respond to any of her messages, but that didn't mean I wasn't hurting inside. If in these 3 years we'd been together, she had treated me like this for even half a year, maybe I wouldn't have been able to say goodbye. In my mind, I clung tightly to that memory, the image of a girl in a beige dress painting under the sunlight. A scene that replayed over and over, never tiring, reminding me again and again, this is the person you love. It was like a spell, one that made me feel foolish, yet bound me so completely that I couldn't turn back. In the quiet of midnight, I would sometimes wonder to myself, if Liu Ruyan could ever genuinely care for me, if she could change. But those were empty hopes. It was nothing more than a beautiful daydream, which had been shattered the moment Luhan left the country in a fit of anger. Everything fell apart after that, becoming mere shadows. When Luhan left, he left Liu Ruyan terrified, thinking he'd disappear for another 3 years. She chased after him, only to be shut out. When she returned home, she never contacted me again. Until one day, she got drunk and sent me a message with an address. Luhan, I know you're back. If you don't see me, I'll jump in the river. I knew she had sent it to the wrong person, but when I looked at the photo she'd attached of her by the river in the sunlight, wearing that familiar beige dress, her eyes like a frightened doe, it blurred together with that shadowy figure in my heart. I closed my eyes. I had to admit, I was pathetic. I still loved this girl in the beige dress. So I went to the address Liu Ruyan had sent me. I had saved Liu Ruyan, but ended up in the hospital myself. I stayed in a deep sleep for days, nearly half a month. During those 2 weeks, I had a dream. In the dream, a girl with doe-like eyes was filled with tears, looking at me saying, "How could you forget me?" In the dream, I was stunned. And suddenly I remembered the image in my heart that I'd always loved. She wasn't Liu Ruyan. In that instant, I remembered I'd been in love with Bai Youwei for 2 years. And on the day I hit my head and lost my memory, I'd planned to confess my love to Bai Youwei. That day, she wore a beige dress, painting under the sunlight. Her skin fair, her face pure and calm. When she turned to look at me, her smile was as clear as a mountain spring. But she never got to hear my confession. Instead, she watched me take her sister's hand. I remembered her doe-like eyes as she looked at me and Liu Ruyan. Seeing her hope turn to despair, she forced back her tears and gave us her blessing. My girl. For these past 3 years, how had she managed to endure it all? I closed my eyes, and a tear slipped down my cheek. The nurse saw me crying and called the doctor with excitement. "Doctor, the patient is waking up." Yes, I was finally waking up. The real me had awakened. I had come back to life. They transferred me to a regular ward, and as I was leaving, I saw Liu Ruyan. Her hair was tied up carelessly. Her dress was wrinkled. Her eyes were bloodshot. And her face was pale as a wall. It was obvious she hadn't slept in days. When she saw me come out, her body wavered slightly, and she stepped forward. Before she could speak, tears were already streaming down. "Kong, you scared me to death." The nurse beside her, admiring, said, "You two must be very close. This young lady has been here, sleepless, for almost 3 days now. If it were in the past, I might have been deeply moved by her devotion, but now my gaze no longer lingered on Liu Ruyan. I looked past her to see Bai Youwei standing there, just as exhausted and disheveled, with red, swollen eyes, and tears streaming down as she said, "Please, don't do anything dangerous again." She sniffled. "If something happened to you." Halfway through her words, she fell silent, lowering her head. Liu Ruyan and the nurse helped me to my room, and Liu Ruyan asked Bai Youwei to wait outside. She came bustling back in, helping with my water and meal card. But I stopped her. "Liu Ruyan, Can you ask Bai Youwei to come in for a moment? Liu Ruyan froze, then hesitantly called Bai Youwei into the room. I looked at Bai Youwei. In these 3 years, she had changed. Her length hair was cut into a short bob just brushing her chin. Her dresses replaced by leather jackets and jeans. But her eyes remained the same, still like those of a fawn, blinking at me. Her face streaked with tears, glistening in the sunlight. I closed my eyes, struggling to suppress the ache in my heart. I gestured for Bai Youwei to come closer, close enough that I could see the flawless fairness of her skin. And with a trembling voice, struggling to hold back my tears, I said, "Qingqing, I'm sorry, Qingqing. I remember everything now." She froze, and in the next moment, she burst into tears, her sobs repressed, yet unable to contain the deep grievance she'd been holding in, her cries small and painful, like a wounded little animal. My own eyes welled with tears. I had promised her that I would give her the greatest happiness. But instead, I'd made her watch as I spent 3 years with someone else. Liu Ruyan had never really understood her sister's life. All these years, she'd focused all her energy on Luhan. She had no idea that Bai Youwei and I had felt something for each other years ago. She didn't know I had once planned to confess to Bai Youwei. Now, she just stared blankly as I apologized to Bai Youwei, watching her sister cry like a child. She listened to our simple explanations in disbelief, her face growing paler, her breathing unsteady. After a moment, her body wavered, her nose and eyes turning red. Finally, she managed to ask, "So, these 3 years, was it all just a mistake about who you loved?" I was silent for a while, then nodded, "If that's how you want to see it." "Yes." Liu Ruyan's body wobbled once more. She looked at me, then at Bai Youwei, and big tears rolled down her cheeks. Through gritted teeth, she said, "He Kong, you really are heartless." Her lips quivered as she cried. "How could you?" Just as I'd finally sorted out my feelings. "You're telling me these 3 years were all because I'd mistaken you for someone else?" I stayed silent. I could barely process seeing Liu Ruyan like this. She clearly didn't love me anymore. So why all this now? Bai Youwei shook her head at me. "He Kong, it's been 3 years. You and my sister have feelings for each other now. I don't want to hurt her. But I didn't have time to answer her, because I was perplexed. I asked Liu Ruyan when I saved you, and nearly drowned myself. You were on the phone with Luhan. As I was sinking, you told him he was the only one you loved. I didn't feel anger or disappointment anymore toward Liu Ruyan. Only confusion. Liu Ruyan, were you possessed? You watched me drown with your own eyes. And now, suddenly, you're so devoted to me? I adjusted the blanket over myself. Please don't act like this. I'm not used to it. Liu Ruyan's face grew paler. Her gaze locked on me, but she couldn't find words. She seemed as if she wanted to explain something, but nothing came out. After all, these were her own actions, weren't they? Hearing everything I said, Bai Youwei burst into tears. She ran in front of me, blocking Liu Ruyan's view, "Sister, I didn't want to say anything, but this is just too much for He Kong." Tears streamed down her face. "How could you, after he risked his life to save you, still stab him in the heart like this? Don't you know? When you were little, he protected you with his life." Liu Ruyan froze. And I froze as well. I didn't even know what Bai Youwei was talking about. But she wiped her tears and angrily said, "When we were kids, we got targeted by traffickers, and they tried to kidnap us. He Kong came looking for us, and followed us through the danger, staying close behind. In a crowded street, he shouted for help, yelling, 'Traffickers!' Bai Youwei clutched my hand tightly. Because of that, he even got slashed by one of the traffickers, and he still has a scar on his hand. Not only did you completely forget about it, but you've also repaid him with betrayal." Bai Youwei sobbed so hard she couldn't catch her breath, and I lay there on the bed, thinking for a long time, until I finally remembered. The pain from that injury was so intense. My brain had almost blocked it out. If no one had mentioned it, I truly might not have remembered. Liu Ruyan remembered as well. Her face grew even paler. He Kong. I forgot. She leaned against the wall, her voice filled with despair. How could I have forgotten? Bai Youwei bent down and gently hugged me. It doesn't matter if you forgot. I remembered it for us. I was discharged from the hospital soon after, and Bai Youwei and I had already wasted 3 whole years. I didn't want to waste another second. I decided to bring Bai Youwei to meet both our parents. We went to her family's home first. The moment her parents saw me, they couldn't stop smiling. They knew me well as we moved in the same business circles, understanding each other's background completely. They were genuinely happy to see Bai Youwei and me together. But that day, Liu Ruyan was there too. The entire time, she kept her head down, not saying a single word. She just kept her gaze lowered, listening as her parents praised how well Bai Youwei and I suited each other, and even started discussing our future wedding plans with us. It wasn't until I was about to leave that Liu Ruyan finally stood up, volunteering to walk me out on behalf of her parents. She accompanied me all the way to the entrance, through the carved iron gate of the Liu family home. The soft yellow glow of the evening light cast over Liu Ruyan's pale face. Only then did I understand why she hadn't lifted her head all night. Her eyes were swollen and red from countless tears. She must have cried over and over. Even though my memory had returned, and I remembered who I truly loved, seeing those eyes, I couldn't help but fall silent. In all those 3 years, I'd never seen Liu Ruyan cry like this. Not even when Luhan had left her without a word. Not even then. Liu Ruyan sniffled, her nose tinged red, her eyes so similar to Bai Youwei's, filled with a mist of tears as she looked at me. He Kong, 3 years with you, and I never even met your parents once. Her quiet tears fell onto her pale feet. And now, after only a few days with Bai Youwei, you've already come here. I sighed, and it did hurt a little inside. Back then, I desperately begged Liu Ruyan, hoping she would bring me home with her, formally meet her parents, and give our relationship a clear future, so I could have an official place in her life. But Liu Ruyan would only smile, kiss me lightly, and change the subject, never mentioning it again, for 3 whole years. Aside from Liu Ruyan and me, Luhan and Bai Youwei, no one else knew we had ever been together. How ridiculous! 3 years of a relationship, and only 4 people were in on the secret. Yet Liu Ruyan's infatuation with Luhan back then was a public spectacle known by everyone. To this day, even her parents, and even my parents know that Liu Ruyan has had a crush on a certain guy for many years. I sighed again. Liu Ruyan, for 3 whole years, you didn't want anyone to know about me. Did you forget? I was never the one who didn't want to meet our parents. It was always you. Liu Ruyan froze, her tears falling like broken beads from a necklace. In the past, when I saw her like this, no matter how angry I was, I'd convince myself that she was my woman, and I had to cherish her. No matter how upset I felt, I would always hold her close to comfort her. But today, I looked at the warm glow of the lights in the Liu family's home, one of which belonged to Bai Youwei's room, and felt a quiet warmth in my heart. I waved at Liu Ruyan. You should go inside. It's cold out here. Don't catch a cold. As I turned to leave, Liu Ruyan called out to me. He Kong. Her voice filled with despair and sorrow, a hint of grievance. I miss you. He Kong. I didn't say a word. I walked away with firm steps. Bai Youwei and I got engaged soon after, having wasted 3 years. I didn't want to delay even a minute longer. At the engagement banquet, Bai Youwei wore a long dress once again, her hair softly draped over her shoulders, smiling at me with eyes full of joy, her gaze entirely on me. The guests at the engagement party, the guests were close family and friends. It wasn't a large crowd, and everyone was smiling warmly at us. But Liu Ruyan had drunk quite a bit, one glass after another. Before long, she was completely drunk. After the engagement banquet ended, Bai Youwei drove our parents home, while I offered rides to the friends who had also had too much to drink. By the time I'd taken everyone home, Liu Ruyan was still drinking. I had no idea how much she'd actually consumed, but I remembered when Luhan had returned only to leave again. She drank heavily back then too. She drank late into the night, then came back to the bedroom, wrapping her arms around me from behind, and whispered softly, "I'm sorry." The next day, she had chased after Luhan, leaving the country with him. But this time, the name she mumbled wasn't Luhan. It was mine. When she saw me approaching, Liu Ruyan wobbled to her feet. He conged, "Did you come here for me?" Her eyes sparkled for a moment, just like the day I'd confessed my love to her, as if little stars were dancing within them. But those stars had never shone for me. Liu Ruyan staggered toward me, her high heels unsteady on the ground. In an instant, she tumbled down, her knees hitting the hard floor with a loud thud. The impact echoed through the room. Liu Ruyan froze, her eyes filling with tears. She reached out to me, her voice full of childlike grievance. He conged, "It hurts." In the past, whenever she got a bump or a bruise, even if it was a small one, she would come to me like a little girl, running to my side. He conged, "It hurts, it hurts. You'd better blow on it to make it better." But with Luhan, she would endure countless wounds without a word. Now, reaching out to me, she said, "He conged, it hurts." Tears slipped down her cheeks. He conged, "Help me. I'm begging you. Please help me." I watched her, quietly sobbing, as if she'd been abandoned. But I only took a step back and called a female server. "Please help this lady up. Take her to the car I ordered at the entrance." Then I turned and walked out, instructing the driver of the ride share to take her home safely. And I noted the car's license plate. I did all this carefully, not for Liu Ruyan, but for Bai Youwei's sake. As she got into the car, Liu Ruyan began to cry. She sat in the back seat, lowering the window, pointing to her chest. He conged, "It hurts here. It's been hurting for days, and no medicine has helped." He conged, "What should I do?" I saw deep despair in her eyes. "How do I stop this pain?" He conged. I shook my head. "Maybe you should go to a better hospital. I'm not a doctor, but I know what it's like to stare at an empty bed night after night, with a pain in your chest so strong you can't even stand. Even now, with by my side, thinking back to those days still fills me with sadness." I gave my heart sincerely and received nothing in return. So, Liu Ruyan, if it hurts, you deserve it. Betraying true love never goes unpunished. After getting engaged to Bai Youwei, I began returning to my previous work routine. I used to be a workaholic, but during the 3 years I was with Liu Ruyan, it felt as if I was constantly under a dark cloud, filled with anxiety, growing more and more dispirited, unable to find the work focus I once had. Now, with Bai Youwei's steady presence and her own dedication to her career, being with her brings me peace of mind, allowing me to focus on building our future. I can finally free my hands to work toward what lies ahead. But I never expected that Liu Ruyan would show up at my company and even pass the interview, joining my team. She was highly recommended as a talented candidate. I knew Liu Ruyan had graduated from a prestigious university, that she was intelligent, and that if she put her mind to it, she could be very competitive. But I didn't understand why she'd go to such lengths, ignoring opportunities at the Liu family's company to come work here. I sighed and asked her to meet me in my office. Liu Ruyan arrived wearing a suit she'd never have worn before, looking very professional, her hair tied up. And standing before me, she said, "I passed the interview fair and square. You can't make me leave." She looked thinner than before, more fragile, as if a gust of wind might blow her over. Yet there was a stubbornness in her eyes. He calm. I'm begging you. Please, give me one more chance. Tears began to fall from her eyes. I've never begged anyone for anything, and I've always loved my sister dearly. But truly, I just can't let you go. Covering her face, Liu Ruyan wept, her shoulders trembling. How could I have driven you away so carelessly? How could I have realized only now that you're the one I love? I rested my hand against my forehead. Even though my feelings for her were gone, there was still a lingering sadness, a bitterness for everything I had once endured. I cleared my throat. Liu Ruyan, there's no future for us. I stood up and handed her a tissue. Not in this lifetime. Don't waste your efforts anymore. All right? You're Bai Youwei's sister, and we'll see each other often. Let's keep some dignity for each other. Liu Ruyan's body wavered slightly. She looked up in disbelief, her eyes red as she gazed at me. He calm. Are you saying I'm lacking dignity? I shook my head. Tears continued to fall from Liu Ruyan's eyes, and she occasionally wiped them away, but he calm. Did you not make any mistakes? Didn't you use me just a little? You couldn't remember who you loved, so you used me to fill your emptiness. She looked at me with a stubborn gaze. Can you honestly say that wasn't the case? I paused, glancing at my hand holding out the tissue, remembering those nights when I gently patted her back, soothing her to sleep. Those nights when she drank too much, and I'd bring her water and hangover medicine. All those cold winter nights, those summer afternoons, those moments when her spirits would drop thinking about Luhan. When I held her tightly in my arms, I took a deep breath, lifted my gaze, and looked directly at her. Liu Ruyan, search your heart and tell me, did I truly ever use you? All those genuine feelings, all that care, have you really forgotten it all? It was you, after all, who, while I was on the verge of drowning, was still whispering sweet words to Luhan. It was you who, when I loved you with all my heart, answered a call and left me to chase after Luhan. It was you who, when I treasured you like something precious, threw me away like trash. I took another deep breath. Liu Ruyan, if you trample on genuine love, you'll end up lonely for the rest of your life. Liu Ruyan stopped crying. Her face was pale, and she looked at me, her lips parted, before finally asking in a trembling voice, "Can't I make it up to you? Can't I somehow make it right?" I opened the door to my office. There's no need. Liu Ruyan, we're over. You need to understand what it means to end things. With slow, faltering steps, she walked toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back and wiped away her tears. Luhan called me, said he's leaving the country again. But this time, I didn't beg him to stay. I just told him to leave quickly if he wanted to go. Her smile was tinged with tears. See, I can let him go too. I actually know the truth. It was you who stayed with me for 3 years, not him. I closed my eyes briefly and interrupted her. Liu Ruyan, the love I had for you, it died. It drowned in that river. I smiled faintly at her. You were the one who let it happen. Did you forget? Liu Ruyan stared at me, stunned, her gaze blank and dazed. After a moment, she covered her mouth and, sobbing, turned and ran out. Liu Ruyan never appeared again after that, until the night before my wedding to Bai Youwei. Drunk, she came to my door, ringing the bell persistently. When I opened the door, she suddenly fell into my arms. She clung tightly to my shirt, startling me. I regained my composure and gently pushed her away. Liu Ruyan smiled at me. He calmed. If I hit you with something right now, would you lose your memory again? I took a cautious step back, and her smile grew wider. Don't worry. No matter what, I'm still Bai Youwei's sister. I wouldn't ruin her wedding. She looked at me with regret, and as she kept looking, her eyes reddened again. He Kong, could you forget me just one more time? I'm begging you. She closed her eyes, trying to hold back her tears. He Kong, It hurts. It really hurts. Please. 2 tears fell, landing on the floor. Choking back a sob, she said, tomorrow's wedding means nothing can ever be undone. I'll never be able to rest in your arms again. Will I? I nodded, no, you won't. Liu Ruyan opened her eyes again, studied me carefully, and smiled, He Kong. Why can't I let go of you? He waved at me. Goodbye. He Kong. After a few steps, she paused. Her back turned to me, and with a bittersweet smile she said, there was a time when you asked me to call you husband, and I never wanted to say it. He Kong. Just one last time. Would that be all right? Without waiting for an answer, she turned around, and with a sad smile, whispered, husband, under the moonlight. Her tears glistened clearly. I watched her retreating figure, feeling a wetness at the corner of my eye. But I knew it wasn't really me who was crying. It was my once genuine love, now long dead, shedding its final tears. It was that love buried in the icy depths of the river that wept, weeping for the care it had never received in life. Care that came only too late after its death. On the day I married Bai Youwei, the wedding was grand and beautiful. Bai Youwei wore a white mermaid gown. Her beauty was beyond words. As I stood on the stage, listening to the officiant tell our story, watching her joyful smiles on the big screen, I couldn't help but feel immensely grateful. Grateful to the heavens above for letting me wake up in time and ultimately find the one I truly loved. Bai Youwei held my hand tightly, her eyes red from tears. Crying like a little rabbit, I pulled her into my arms to comfort her. But out of the corner of my eye, I glanced toward the audience. There, seated at the main table, was Liu Ruyan. She wore a beige dress, her long hair cascading over her shoulders, her lips curved in a brilliant smile, but silent tears streamed from her eyes. Someone beside her asked what was wrong. Seeing her cry so hard, Liu Ruyan wiped her tears, looked at me with a smile, and said, it's nothing. I'm just envious of my sister for having the best husband in the world. Time slipped by in the blink of an eye, the years passing swiftly, without realizing it. Bai Youwei and I had walked together for 12 years. Our careers were stable. We had a son and a daughter, and our life was peaceful and happy. As for Liu Ruyan, the day after my wedding, she left the country. It's been more than 10 years now. Every time she returns, it's always brief, fleeting. Unknowingly, more than a decade had passed since I last saw her, until this year, when Bai Youwei underwent a minor surgery. Liu Ruyan returned to visit her. We met in Bai Youwei's hospital room. She was still thin, still fragile, wearing her usual beige dress, quietly greeting me. Long time no see, I joked with her. You must really love beige dresses. How many of them do you own? Liu Ruyan opened her mouth, as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she lowered her gaze and said nothing, only managing a bittersweet smile. She took out a small gift box. I have a studio in Italy. I carved this myself. I opened it to find 2 small figurines, a man resembling me and a woman resembling Bai Youwei, quietly leaning on each other, as if in a timeless moment of peace. Clearing her throat, Liu Ruyan said, I didn't have any photos of you two, so I carved from memory. I hope you like it. Bai Youwei and I both nodded enthusiastically. We love it. It's perfect. Liu Ruyan smiled. I'm glad. She walked over to Bai Youwei, gently stroking her hair. Consider this my blessing for you two. May you grow old together, with love as strong as ever. She paused, then added softly with her head down, learn to cherish each other. Bai Youwei nodded with a bright smile. As I put the gift away, I asked Liu Ruyan, I heard you're still single. Why not find someone special? Liu Ruyan looked up at me briefly, then averted her gaze. She looked out at the sunlight streaming through the clouds, and after a while, smiled faintly. I'm not looking anymore. Being alone is fine too. With a wry smile, she added, I guess I set my standards too high. always hoping to find someone who would risk everything for me, but such people are rare. Bai Youwei offered a few comforting words before growing tired. Liu Ruyan stood up to say goodbye. I walked her out. As we stepped out of the hospital building, we reached the lawn, with clear skies above and sunlight softly illuminating Liu Ruyan's beige dress. A gentle breeze brushed through her hair, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the girl from over a decade ago, the one who used to paint. But now, that girl was smiling with calm acceptance. Alright, you don't need to walk me any further, go back inside. I nodded and turned to leave. Just as I turned, I heard a quiet, wistful voice behind me. I miss you so much. It was barely louder than a whisper, as if she were talking to herself. Why can't time turn back in this world? I paused for a moment, but in the end, I didn't look back. Ahead of me, my wife and children awaited. Behind me was only a lonely soul clinging to a memory of a long-dead love. A heart that has died cannot be revived, and love cannot be rewound. In the end, we can only keep moving forward, accepting the consequences of our choices in love. Facing the sunlight, I walked confidently toward my future, to the woman I loved, and I knew I would never look back again.